Yes. So Stein is
One more chance to get lost amongst the trees. Mark Frost's Twin Peaks: The Final Dossier has arrived this weekend, a companion piece to his novel The Secret History of Twin Peaks. Both of them have bookended the broadcast of season 3, or Twin Peaks: The Return as others call it. I think it's probably fair to say that this is our last bite of the Twin Peaks cherry pie. I've got a Belgian bun at hand and plenty of Earl Grey tea, so I will get back to you as and when I find nuggets of interest and discussion in amongst the pages of this, the last artifact, I suspect we'll see, of Twin Peaks. Straight away, the first item is delicious. It's from 1989 and it's Albert Rosenfeld's autopsy report on Leo Johnson. It is wonderful to hear Albert's voice again. Mark Frost, obviously co-creator of Twin Peaks, has his tone, his intonation, his voice exactly down pat, and as you're reading this you can hear Miguel Ferrer saying these lines. A nice piece of confirmation here about one of the locations in Twin Peaks and what we are to call it. A local adult venue known by its sign as the Bang Bang Bar, but more colloquially as the Roadhouse. So there you go. There was some, naturally after 25 years, some people new to Twin Peaks who hadn't watched the original show 25 years ago, and they were getting a bit of a ribbing, let's say, from snootier fans for calling it the Bang Bang Bar. It's the Roadhouse. True Twin Peaks fans know that it's called the Roadhouse, not the Bang Bang Bar. Well, here you go. Here's your answer. It's both. So give it a rest. A little Audrey Horne breadcrumb here. I was hoping, beyond hope, that we would, maybe later on in the book we will, but I was hoping that we would get some substantial Audrey Horne information, but we get very little. She was in her coma for 3.5 weeks, found once she woke that she was pregnant, never really seemed interested in finding out who the father is. We know that's Mr. C / Bob, but those scant few scenes with Audrey, are they in her head? Are they real life? Who is that guy? Is he a psychotherapist? Are they playing roles? Well, apparently sometimes in Twin Peaks what you see is what you get. Without warning, in a private civil ceremony when Richard was 10, Audrey married her longtime accountant. Witnesses close to the situation suggest that this was more a marriage of financial convenience than affection, and during my research here I've come across troubling accounts of public scenes, heavy drinking, verbal abuse and sexual infidelity, all allegedly on the wife's part. The couple briefly consulted a marriage counsellor, and Audrey apparently consulted her own mental health care professional during this time, but those files are sealed and inaccessible. 4 years ago, without warning, Audrey closed the salon. Not long after, she seemed to vanish from public life into either agoraphobic seclusion or, one troubling rumour suggests, a private care facility. That's all we know. Is that private care facility where she woke up from at the end of the return? What about that crackling electricity that signifies the presence of the lodges? Is this a mystery that we will never get a definitive answer to? Have you made peace with that yet? Or is that tantalising prospect that Mark Frost and David Lynch still want to leave dangling threads there something that piques your interest? Now this is really interesting because in The Secret History of Twin Peaks, it's stated that Norma Jennings' mother is dead. Norma, who runs the Double R Diner, and there was lots of questions asked over social media and online of Mark Frost as to this directly contradicts what we've seen in series 2 when Norma's mother turns up at the diner. It turns out that This discrepancy is nothing to do with alternate realities and different timelines that we thought might have been going on in season 3. It's much more prosaic than this. Norma's father left her mother for another woman. Norma's birth mother died. Her father and his mistress had a daughter, Annie Blackburn. Annie is Norma's half sister, not her cousin. Her stepmom, after her father died, remarried to someone named Blackburn. Annie took on the Blackburn name, got sent to a convent, and all essentially to try and protect Annie and keep some sort of connection going with her, to offer her any kind of love or sisterly stroke motherly influence she could in her life. She has been as civil as she possibly can to this woman, and I guess to the extent of even referring to her as her mother and introducing her as such, even though she introduces Annie as her cousin, I believe. I haven't even got to the end of the double R folder yet, but this is like one of those sections in a soap opera where there's a big reveal. Ooh, you're actually my sister, you're not my real mother. This feels like some of the old Twin Peaks. There is a very slim file in here on Annie Blackburn, and whilst I was hoping to find out what had happened to her after season 2, maybe that's something we'll find out in the remainder of the book, but I wanted to read you this because I think some of this speaks to maybe what Dale was attempting and had failed to do at the very end of season 3. I like to think she, Annie Blackburn, found her own fleeting happiness in those few weeks she spent at the Double R, her sister's unconditional love, the support of a community of friends who genuinely liked her for her charm, intelligence and beauty. A belated introduction to the kind of world she so wanted to know and deserved to live in. She apparently also experienced a chance to develop the first serious romantic relationship of her adult life, as you know, with none other than your old friend, Special Agent Dale Cooper. As I think about what happened to her subsequently, a temptation rises within me in some way to hold Agent Cooper responsible. There's a long chain of circumstances here that threads back to the worst self-admittedly mistake of Cooper's life. I'm alluding, as I'm sure you know, to his youthful dalliance with the wife of his ex-partner and former mentor, Wyndham Earle. We know now that Caroline Earle suffered from such extreme mental and emotional distress during the course of her marriage that her reaching out to Cooper, as she did, seems likely to have been a cry for help more than an attempt to seduce. Cooper never could resist a bird with a broken wing. You know as well as I do by now that it's a central part of his makeup. White knight syndrome, the irresistible urge to rescue every damsel in distress he came across. Without stepping too far into profiling here, my feeling is that this relates directly to Cooper's troubled relationship with his own mother, a fragile woman who suffered through a sizable portion of Cooper's teenage years in varying degrees of mental and physical suffering, the product of her own turbulent marriage. Before she eventually straightened herself out, Cooper spent a lot of time tending to her, taking care of her, perhaps too much time, and this seems to have encouraged in him a moral conviction, if not an obligation, towards saving women in jeopardy that he carried into his own adulthood. And this is a drive that we see at the very end of Twin Peaks: The Return, the killing two birds with one stone, not only finding Laura Palmer's killer, but trying to prevent her from being killed in the most mind-boggling and bizarre way that goes so fantastically wrong. I find it really interesting with season 3 that this figure that is held up as all that is righteous, good. I mean, Dale is a good man. He's almost too good to be true, a Renaissance man, a Boy Scout. That there's a drive, a kernel, right at the heart of him that pushes him to be this wonderful, good man, but also pushes him too far in that direction. And that instinct to go further than is perhaps necessary ultimately also ends up causing damage to the lives around him. It's a really interesting take on Dale, and I suspect when I come to rewatch season 3 I may choose to view it almost as a deconstruction of Dale Cooper. Well, good Lord, there's one more question answered that's been left dangling for 25 years. How's Annie? How's Annie? Not good, as it turns out. Essentially catatonic, with a second suicide attempt after being rescued from the lodge. Is now, to this day, still in that state in a private psychiatrical hospital near Spokane. Vegetative, unresponsive, apart from one sentence that she says at 8:38 a.m. every year on the anniversary of her being found in the woods with what was presumed to be Dale Cooper. She says, "I'm fine," once a year, every year at 8:38, and that's it. Wow, that's depressing. And it puts a whole new spin on Evil Dale asking how's Annie and laughing, how's Annie? As if he somehow knows that she's never coming back. Maybe the I'm fine is a response to that question. Is that it? She said it out loud in a room in the hospital full of people, and the doctor said it wasn't in response to anything, and the doctor suggested she was perhaps responding to an auditory hallucination. Is she answering Evil Dale's question, how's Annie? I'm fine. And once a year, every year, she answers the question, year upon year upon year. Wow. Well, there's a file in here under the name Major Briggs, and Mark Frost does an excellent job, really, of just pinning down the spine of the mythology of season 3 and the potential motivations for Mr. C, referred to here as the double, what Major Briggs is likely to have done at Listening Post Alpha when he set his Mayday alarm and supposedly died, but then his non-aged body turned up 25 years later. And Mark Frost really connects the dots and leads you through all the breadcrumbs laid down in season 3 and sort of lays them all end to end and says, look, this is sort of what we're dealing with here. This is all the information we've already got, but just in a much more digestible form, which is really appreciated. And what intrigues me is that the next file after that is Philip Jeffries. Oh, this is in the Philip Jeffries files. What I went looking for was the moment when Philip Jeffries stopped investigating these things and started living them. The conclusion I would submit is this: it happened in Buenos Aires. So just pre-firewalk with me. I've tracked down the few scraps of information he left behind there, and one item in particular stands out. Although he went to Argentina in 1986 to investigate what appeared to be an international criminal enterprise, he very quickly focused on an aspect of the case that I believe we've misunderstood all these years. Within his first month, Jeffries identified a shadowy suspect, someone he believed could be the central person of interest in charge of this entire operation. All he had at first was a name he mentioned that same day in your office. Judy. This is getting pretty crazy. Judy, or Jaude, as Tamara has now identified, is also the name of an ancient entity in Sumerian mythology. This dates back to at least 3000 BC. The name was used to describe a species of wandering demon, also generically known as an Dooku, that had escaped from the underworld and roamed freely throughout the earth, where they feasted on human flesh and allegedly ripped out souls from their victims, which provided even more meaningful nourishment. Is that what Bob did to Wyndham Earle in the Black Lodge at the end of season 2? Psh! They particularly thrived while feeding, and I quote, on human suffering. Garmin Bozier, folks. These beings were said to appear in both male and female forms. Jowday indicated the female, and the male was known as Baal. And while they were considered beyond dangerous individually, if a male and female ever united while on Earth, as the ancient texts claimed, their resulting marriage would create something far more perilous, as in the end of the world as we know it. Is that why Mr. C was seeking to trap Judy Jowday, the mother of abominations, in the glass case? Why he was looking for the coordinates to find her? Was he looking to unite with her? This shit's going mythological off the scale. Holy shit, we're into the alternate timeline now where Laura Palmer disappeared rather than was murdered. In this alternate timeline, 1 year after her disappearance, on the anniversary of her disappearance, Leland commits suicide. He shoots himself, and Tamara Preston turns her attentions to Laura's only surviving living relative, Sarah Palmer, or to give her her full name, Sarah Judith Novak Palmer. I searched all the way back to her childhood in New Mexico, where the family moved months after her birth in Bellevue, Washington, in the summer of 1943. Her father was a Defense Department employee who had been transferred there to work in some small but unspecified subcontractor role on the Manhattan Project. The family lived outside Los Alamos in a new suburb built on the edge of the desert specifically for workers involved in the program. Nothing about their family life during that time particularly stands out unless you count the first successful nuclear bomb test, codenamed Trinity, which took place at White Sands, New Mexico on July 16th, 1945. Was Sarah Palmer the young girl? My mind is reeling. Wow, so I've just finished it. It ends with Tamara's final thoughts that read on a couple of different levels. One, almost the voice of the author coming through, telling us that the only way we can really make sense of things is not to look for answers in, as he says, a book, a poem, a play. We have to come up with these answers for ourselves, and I think he is talking perhaps to the Twin Peaks fan who perhaps even purchased this book hoping for it. There are some answers in here, but there are more mysteries, just as there is in every single iteration of Twin Peaks. It wouldn't be Twin Peaks without it. He guides us to come up with our own answers, as I think the series has always done, and as I think really the Secret History of Twin Peaks did as well. Offered such a panoply of conspiracy theories that it really just invited you to, well, pick the ones you like the sound of. You don't have to put your stock in trade in all of them. We're just laying out the meal, the buffet, you know. You take the items that take your fancy, but at the same time really doubles down on one of the themes as this rolls towards a conclusion in this book, is a notion that I think has been at the heart of Twin Peaks from the start: the light and the dark, and those who put themselves in between the two to protect people from the darkness. It's a theme in this. It's the parting thought of this: fight the good fight. There's a message from Margaret Coulson in this, the Log Lady, which is as heartfelt and touching as ever, which really gets to the nub of that, which I think really digs right down into the heart of what Twin Peaks is to its creators. This idea of the forces of darkness and the forces of light, and what it has been to me, especially hammered home watching season 3, The Return. If you go back and watch my videos, you'll see me constantly returning to the themes of the forces of light and the forces of darkness. And they're played with in these grand mythological terms of black lodges and dwellers on the threshold and shadow cells and the like, but they're also anchored down to our world, to real world concerns, real world evils that need addressing and fighting against, injustices that do occur. In the secret history of Twin Peaks, one of my main takeaways from it, in amongst all the freewheeling conspiracy theory madness, is bringing the reader's attention back and underlining the historical fact of the enormous injustice that was done to the Native Americans in the continent of North America. It's something, reading that book, that you can still feel that Mark Frost is angry about. In a great sense, The Secret History of Twin Peaks is a book that is about America's past. This, bubbling away under the surface, has things to say about America's present and its future. There are allusions to the opioid crisis. There are allusions to the failing industries and what ramifications that will have to the people left behind, abandoned there, that we're seeing sort of come to fruition in the politics of today. It's not preachy. It's there if you want to see it, and if you don't, and if you just want to pick up the clues and the extra little bits about the Twin Peaks universe, that's the primary main focus of this. Ultimately, this has been like spending some time, some extra time, with characters from a TV show I've loved that didn't always get centre stage in the third series of the show. And then the book develops into discussions of what happened in series 3 and points to little bits beyond it as well. This is a vital little artifact to view series 3 through. This is a lens through which you can watch series 3 if you choose to. If you choose not to and just want to watch the TV series, that's exactly what that is there to do. But I'm so glad I got this. This, along with The Secret History of Twin Peaks, I think sets, especially season 3, but the whole of the series, the whole of season 1, 2 and 3, into a specific context that I'm very happy with. What can I say? So I'm glad I got to spend some more time in Twin Peaks. It really did, reading this, feel like that's what I was doing. And for that alone, Mark Frost, thank you, because any extra time spent in Twin Peaks is a gift.